All right, Mr. Chair, we're on the air whenever you're ready to begin.
Okay. I will call to order the Santa Barbara County Planning Commission meeting of the 2nd of March, 2022. Please join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and for the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Villalobos, good morning to you. Will you please give us the TV coverage announcement and roll call?
I'm happy to, sir. Planning Commission hearings are televised live on County and Santa Barbara Television, CSB TV Channel 20 at 9 a.m. in the South Coast, Lompoc, San Ynez Valley, San Maria, and Orca areas. Rebroadcasts of Planning Commission hearings are on Fridays after 5 p.m. on CSB TV Channel 20. Today's hearing will also be streamed live on the county's website and will be available for download in a day or two. Moving on to the roll call. Commissioner Bridley.
Here.
Commissioner Park.
Here.
Commissioner Farini.
Here.
Commissioner Martinez.
Here.
And Chair Cooney.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Villalobos. First item of business is to reconsider the circumstances of the COVID-19 state of emergency. Is it Mr. Wilson that's going to lead us through that?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Staff continues to recommend that the Planning Commission make those findings. I'm going to direct staff to remain remote for another 30 days. When I go to the projection report, we're going to go over these findings again, or when we're going to place them back on the agenda. Two things that we're thinking about is we understand that the requirements for mask wearing and other circumstances are relaxing. However, staff is recommending that we continue to make these findings to monitor to see if the numbers do increase, and also it provides staff timing to prepare for when we do eventually return in person in meetings. So there's a little bit of coordination that we need to do to be able to pull that off. So we recommend that we again make these findings today.
Mr. Wilson, a question. By making the findings, it doesn't bind us for 30 days of remote meetings, does it? We would be able to, at another meeting, review the matter and determine if we choose to go forward in person.
Chair Cooney, that is correct. What we can do is and we're actually going to put this on the agenda next week to make the 30 days go into the beginning of April. And I'll go over that during the projection report, but we can leave this item on the agenda so that when the Planning Commission does want to reconsider it, it's agendized and we can shorten that time and not have to go the full 30 days. So Chair Cooney, that is correct. We could, we're not bound by the 30 days. It just gives us 30 days to do that.
Okay, great. That's what I think we would prefer, is to have some flexibility rather than locking into a definite 30 days. It may end up being that or more, but the scene is changing quite rapidly, as everyone's aware. Okay, Mr. Wilson, how about the agenda status report and then the projection report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking at the status of the agenda today, there are two items. The first is the appeal of the Big Bend cannabis operation. And then we have a project in Carpinteria located off of 3508 Via Real. On the first item, the appeal of the Big Bend operation, staff has submitted a memo requesting that this item be pulled off of the agenda. And then staff, due to additional information that staff received. And then once staff has reviewed that, we'll place it back on the agenda for review. Staff can go more into detail on that when the item comes up on the standard agenda. But depending on the action the Planning Commission takes on that, if it's dropped off the agenda, we would have just the one item today for action.
Okay. And the projection report.
So my voice is starting to come back, so I apologize. It's still a little raspy. Bear with me on the projection report. There's been some changes as of this morning. Our next hearing is on March 9th, which is next Wednesday. It's the Arctic Cold Freezer Facility. That's a pretty substantial project, and so it could take us a little time to get through that next week. So that is the one item on the agenda next week. Now, following that, the change that occurred this morning is that we are moving the item that we had tentatively placed on the projection report, the El Capitan site improvements. We're moving that to April 6th. So there won't be any items projected for March 30th or April 13th at this time. The reason, so part of that moving it to April 6th, I know there may have been a conflict with one of the commissioners on April 13th, and that is during the budget workshops. So it does give staff a little breathing room that week for being able to respond to the budget workshops. So the change is El Capitan is going to move to April 6th, no items on March 30th and no items on April 13th. Now, if we, next week, we're going to place the reconsider the COVID situations again, that 30 days will take us to April 6th. And then we can reconsider it on April 6th if we want to go another 30 days, or at least set that 30 days and then reconsider it at a later hearing. So hopefully I didn't confuse everybody too much on that one. So then after, oh, I'm sorry.
I had a question.
Yes, Commissioner Bryson.
And I'm sorry, my printer ran out of ink yesterday, so I didn't print. I'm not looking at the current one, but I had the 5-year capital improvement program on March 30th. Where's that now?
Yeah, it's moved to April 27th.
Okay.
So April 6th, we'll have El Capitan site improvements, and that is in Commissioner Park's district. So we wanted, if there was a conflict on the 13th, we wanted him to be available for that hearing. So moving down the projection report on April 27th, we do have 3 items projected on that. Refugio Farm LLC, and then I think that's SIA appeal of the Old College Ranch cannabis cultivation. And then we have an appeal of the Razo homestay. And then that's where the 5-year capital improvement program is placed at this time on April 27th. And then on May 4th, we have several appeals of a cannabis cultivation operation outside of the city of Goleta on Winchester Canyon Road. So that concludes the projection report. And then staff is looking at other projects that they may place later on the projection report. Currently, just as an aside, there's been a little bit of movement. Staff is currently taking a lot of appeals to the board of supervisors. So that's one of the reasons why we're not seeing a lot of projects on the planning commission, because we have a lot of work going to the board on appeals. So bear with us as we continue to move projects through. So that concludes the projection report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson, are there questions? Commissioner Park has his hand up.
Yes, Secretary Wilson, you mentioned a cannabis project, I think it was on Winchester Road in Goleta, is that right?
Commissioner Park, through the chair, that is correct. It's on projected on May 4th.
Okay, I haven't been able to keep really good track of what the district boundary changes have been. It looks like they were all designed to put all outdoor cannabis in the 3rd district, but I'm sure that wasn't what was the intention. But is that in the 3rd district now, this project?
Commissioner Park, I'll double check that and get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you. Oh, another question, just a request. You know, when you talk about the emergency regs and going back to meetings and all that, I've been kind of looking at it in the prism of, okay, what would I like, which seems a little selfish. And then, okay, what would be good for the public? And I think we're looking for kind of hybrid ways of the public participating at hearings if they're live and participating by Zoom and all that. But I kind of realize I've left out thinking about staff. So when we address this topic again, I'd like to just have sort of your summary of an informal polling of staff. Are they comfortable all meeting up in a room again or not? I'd just like to hear that. So thank you.
Yes, thanks. Good questions. And that's a topic that's being considered by public agencies all over the state. And I think where we're going a step at a time is the right pace. But, it is our obligation to meet in person at this time as soon as it's safe to do so. And that's the issue. When is it safe to do so? And whose opinion of safe counts? So we'll certainly have time to study it in the future. But for the next 30 days, we'll continue to meet on Zoom in all likelihood.
And Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I apologize. I got excited with the agenda status report. We do need to have a motion and action on the item number 4 on the agenda to remain remote.
Okay,
Make that.
but let's finish with the projection report, and then we'll go back to that. Commissioner Martinez has a question.
Yeah, actually, I have more of a comment. I have a commitment in regards to making a court appearance, which the judge didn't let me out of. It'll only take like a minute or two. So if I raise my hand, I know I don't want to, especially during appeals, I have to be sitting and listening to it. So if I raise my hand, I just wanted to bring that to your attention. It'll only take like 2-3 minutes. Sorry about it, but it's just one of those things coming into this.
You mean today, Commissioner Martinez?
Yeah, I have them on Zoom right here. So I'm just listening for my case to be called and I'll be right back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. If we see you disappear, we'll know you're close by. Commissioner Park, did you have another comment question?
I always do, but not really. So
Okay.
it's just, I got my thing up.
Good. Okay, let's go back to item 4. And that was to reconsider the circumstances. So do we have a motion to support that suggestion of staff?
I would
move.
make a motion.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll second.
Commissioner Bradley makes the motion, seconded by Commissioner Martinez. So roll call, Mr. Villalobos.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Hi.
Commissioner Farini, Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Chair Cooney.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, so we are down to the part of our agenda where we invite any members of the public that happen to have joined us this morning to make comment on matters other than the matters that are on our agenda. Mr. Villalobos, we'll look to you for guidance. Are there any members of the public here for public comment?
Mr. Chair, I believe our speakers are here for items on the standard agenda, but I just want to give them the opportunity. If you want to speak on items not on today's agenda, just raise your hand and I'll call on you. Looks like the answer is no.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So we'll go to the informational reports from commissioners. Do we have any this morning? Mr. Wilson, your hand is up.
Mr. Chair, I apologize. I think I'm out of practice, or I don't know what it is, my voice, something. So can we just confirm? Can we confirm with Mr. Villalobos that for item 4, we didn't have any public comments on that item as well?
Yeah,
Mr. Chair, again, we didn't have anyone who signed up for this item, but again, if anyone would like to speak to item 4, which is the reconsider the circumstances of the COVID-19 state of emergency, raise your hand and I'll call on you. So it looks like I confirmed there's no public comment on this item.
thank you, Mr. Villalobos and Mr. Wilson, for as bad as your voice sounds, your brain is obviously working at least 2/3 speed. So we're down to informational reports from commissioners, and I don't see anybody with their hand up at this time. So we can go to the director's report. Is Director Plowman in the,
I am. Good
Oh,
morning, Mr.
good.
Chair.
hi,
Hi. I hope you're all well this morning. I have a brief report this morning. I did want to note that there are several bills related to the Brown Act that are moving through the legislature right now that talk about how to either have remote participation by decision makers and the public. And so there's 3 of them right now that are moving through, and our legislative lobbyist, Cliff Berg, is monitoring them and sending us updates on them. And we have a ledge committee meeting coming up, and we'll probably be talking about what the county is interested in supporting. But I'm continuing to follow up and try and have as much flexibility for the commission, for the public, and even staff as we move into the future. So I will keep you posted as we learn more about them and as they move through the process. It's pretty early still in the legislative process. The board did take action yesterday on 2 items. They considered the G&K cannabis appeal. They denied the appeal and approved the project. That's in Carpinteria. That was Grand Farrar's processing facility. And then they approved the Galileo Apartments, which was an item that needed to go before them because of the GPA rezone. And so that is moving forward. The upcoming items that are going to be before the board include the Orcutt gas station appeal on the 8th of March, and Exxon trucking, interim trucking application is also on the 8th of March. The Steiner appeal of the Rufino map in Los Alamos is on the 15th. And an item from the Montecito Planning Commission, a lot line adjustment, is also on the 15th called Hawker Philippides. I wanted to let you know that we previously had the long range planning work program on March 15th, but we wanted to take a little bit more time in our preparation for it. And so we have moved that to April 5th, just before the budget workshops. And the Abood appeal of the Hacienda Amador homestay is on the 5th of April as well. And I think that is all I have. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Park has a question.
I do. I always start daydreaming, and so I kind of missed the part about there was something about long range planning being continued from March 15 to April 5th.
April 5th.
That was,
yeah, we moved it out a couple weeks.
And that's long range planning report of priorities and all that.
The work
before the
program.
Board of Supervisors.
Right. And that had been something that had already been presented to the Planning Commission. Yeah.
Okay. I actually have a question that relates to that and relates to cannabis. This is sort of like a cannabis day today. I asked a question, I think it was our last meeting, it was one of our last meetings, about, what do we call it, the rapid response team from P&D to work on ordinance amendments and so forth.
Right.
But I keep forgetting what the name of it is. And Long Range Planning Division Director Dan Clement, I think, gave a really excellent response about that, and explained how they can move pretty quickly because ordinance amendments are easier. Remember, the late Commissioner Blau said they only take 10 minutes. Well, it's more than that, but whatever. And of course, after the meeting, several people said, well, why didn't you ask the follow-up question about the board having asked P&D to do something to help develop some changes to the cannabis ordinance regarding CUPs a few months ago? And I said, well, I don't know. I'll ask it this time. So what's the status of that?
Sure.
Because I do get a lot of questions about it, including from some members of the Board of Supervisors. So
Sure. Yes, Commissioner Park through the chair. So it did take us a bit of time to recruit and fill the position. it was a planner 3 that was added at the last budget cycle for the division to oversee ordinance amendment packages. And that's the sole focus of their job. And so at the time, the board also gave us direction on the ordinances that they wanted to see move forward. And so they gave us a priority to process cannabis and childcare first. So they've been, after we filled the position, we are working on that, and we are just currently, it was looking like we were going to be back in fall with a change, and we may be making some tweaks to that schedule. Some parts might be coming a little earlier, so I'll keep you posted on when we think we'll be at least at the planning commission with those ordinance amendments. But the latest we think is fall.
I appreciate that. So it sounds like we would at the earliest learn about it or have a hearing in the summer sometime, mid to
Late summer, yeah, is probably correct.
It's good to know. And so this is sort of related. And if this, and I won't look for a real precise answer because the question's so vague, but in Carpinteria, we get some very credible, respectful people that will complain about odor here and there and at different times and different places. And it's just a mystery to really everybody, just where exactly it's coming from and so forth. But, you know, I kind of heard through the grapevine that one, shall we call him scofflaw, that was not really too serious about using their odor control system has now actually been kicked out of their building by their landlord. And what I would like to have is a brief report from you on, okay, how many cannabis projects are there in Carpinteria? How many are approved already? How many are pending? And then what's happening with some of these that are closing down because maybe they weren't too serious about going through the process? Because, you know, if folks are concerned about the odor and one real offender is shut down in the last month, they ought to know about it so we can all, as a community, figure out what to do. It's going to work the best. So I'd like to be able to have that information for the public as well as for me and the other planning commission members. Is that something you could consider and do in some way?
I think we would have to, I could work with the cannabis team and would probably have to agendize it. Wouldn't really be appropriate for my director's report, but that's something we could work on.
I'd sure appreciate it.
Yeah. I do want to let the commission know that we are working on an RFP right now for consultant. Unfortunately, it had stalled a bit because we lost some staff that had been working on it, but to bring in a consultant to help us try and figure out where the odor is coming from in Carpinteria, because it's very hard to tell. As you know, the grows are cheek by jowl. And so one cannabis grower could have an odor problem and it could appear that the neighbor has the odor problem and they don't. So it's very confounding for sure, definitely. I mean, I drove through last night at 10 o'clock in Carpinteria and I could smell cannabis the whole way through the community. So I don't know where it's coming from and I don't know what's happening and why it's happening. And so we are working we're working towards finding a consultant that can try and help us figure that out.
That's really great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else have a question for Ms. Plowman before we move to our standard agenda? Yes, Commissioner Bridley.
I'm sorry, it's not really a question. It's just a second of Commissioner Park's question. I think it's a really good time to have a little bit of a check-in on program now that we've actually seen some approvals getting through the process and then the update that you just gave, Director Plowman. So I completely concur with that. And thank you for trying to find some staff time to do it.
Sure. I do want to note that I just am receiving a communication from Mr. Clement that they think they will probably be bringing the cannabis amendment to the Planning Commission in May. So we had just been talking the last few days about trying to move things around. And so they decided yesterday they thought they could bring it in May.
But we can do that, maybe the compliance report / update programmatically before then? We
Let
have
me
a couple
talk,
items.
yeah, let me coordinate with staff and I'll get something on the agenda for you guys.
Great. Thank you.
I don't want to commit to a date without talking to them.
You bet.
I just comment, Ms. Plowman, we appreciate all the candor you always show during your report. And while cannabis is an overwhelming problem for all of us, it does no good to not share with the public everything we know, or at least the direction in which we're going to find out. And, if odor continues to be a major issue, we're certainly making project by project improvements in that. And you working with staff behind the scenes to let us know all you can do about detection, for example. It's certainly positive, and in interacting with the industry and with the people of Carpinteria, we can have something to say besides it's just really tough to pin down. Thank you.
Sure.
With that, everyone, I think we're ready to move to our standard agenda. And item number 1, if Mr. Villalobos will please read that into the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The following is a hearing on the request of Sarah Isaacson to consider case number 21 APL 52, an appeal of the approval of land use permit case number 19 LUP 133 by the Director of Planning and Development.
All right, thank you. Before we start, I have a disclosure that I spoke with Ms. Isaacson yesterday about the matter, just briefly, the scheduling of the matter, nothing of substance. And that was my only communication regarding item number 1. Anybody else? Commissioner Park?
Oh, yes, I'm glad you brought that up, ex parte disclosures. I had a meeting with Ms. Isaacson and some neighbors. I can't remember when exactly. I think it was in the fall, and it was basically just about how the process works and so forth. But I heard something about the project that I've since forgotten. But I mean, we had a discussion. And then I've had a conversation or two on the telephone since about that. So I'm reporting that.
With Ms. Isaacson and
Yes.
neighbors?
Yeah, just on kind of where we are in this project.
Anybody else have a disclosure? Okay, don't see any. So
What one point, sorry, Mr. Chairman. I don't think it's in this thing. I think it was in the band one, but just in case, I know that Mr. Catherman does the water reports for a lot of these cannabis situations, and Mr. Catherman is a client of mine, and but I don't see him involved in this thing. His business is a client of mine, but I didn't see anything in this report. I think it was in the band report is where I saw his name. And it would not lend any credence in one way or the other, my association with him as to any of the decisions I make.
okay. Yes, that is the matter we're talking about. But the matter before us is preliminarily whether we follow staff's recommendation. So who is going to present for staff on the request staff has made?
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
Good morning, commissioners. This is Catherine Lair. I wanted to take a minute and introduce Mr. Kevin De Los Santos. This is his first planning commission hearing today, but he will likely be in front of the commission many more times, but I just wanted to take a moment. He's been with the division for about 1.5 years now. And here we go. Kevin, with that, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you, Catherine. Good morning, commissioners. So the appellants had submitted new information to Planning and Development regarding the historic water use on the subject property. Staff requires additional time to evaluate this new information and is therefore requesting that the item be removed from today's agenda.
Okay. Any questions from commissioners of staff? Commissioner Park?
Mine's more a comment, and I don't know, should we see if there's any public comment first before I make my comment, or what would you prefer?
We were going to public comment next. We have some speakers for that. We can do that. You can hold your comment.
Why don't I do that? Yeah.
Okay. So at this time, Mr. Villalobos, we're looking for comments from the public on staff's recommendation that we take this matter off our agenda for today.
Mr. Chair, we only had one, looks like one current speaker who had signed up for item number 1, and that is Katie Isaacson Hames. Ms. Hames, if you want to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hi, I apologize. I think I may have signed up incorrectly, but I am here to support the appeal. I didn't actually prepare something to talk about.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Isaacson.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I think the remainder of our speakers are for the next item.
Okay, I'll just ask the question. Is there anyone else to speak on the matter before us? Item number 1 being removed from our agenda today. Okay, looks like we do have Stacy Romaine Bishop. Are you
Hi.
ready to speak on this, Ms. Bishop?
Thank you, commissioners. Yes, I want to just state several of us are here for this item, but I think we're interested in deferring our comments until it comes back to the board.
Yes, thank you. I want to apologize. The recommendation of staff is never made lightly, knowing how prepared all the parties are and the commission is to hear the matter today. But this is appears to be such an important part of the appeal that I at least will be supporting a motion to take it off. But thank you for coming this morning, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thank you.
Is there any other member of the public that hasn't been called on or given a chance to speak that wishes to? Jesse Bishop. Mr. Bishop.
Commissioner, thank you. I am here in support of the appellant group for the Big Bend appeal. I would concur with Stacy that my comments would be more appropriate later if this is continued, but if it's not continued, we would like to speak to the matter. So I'll wait to see how that goes. But I just wanted to be clear for staff, this was the subject that I was intended to speak to. If there was some mistake on my part, I apologize.
None at all. Your comments are appropriate to what we are doing now, which is to take action to continue the matter, actually not to continue the matter, but just to remove it from today's agenda, and staff would then conduct their further work on this matter and notify us and the public when it's reset on the agenda. If that is the will of the commission. Okay, one final ask, if anyone's here that wishes to speak on this matter this morning. Okay. So we've heard from staff. Is that a hand raise from Sarah Isaacson? Okay, let's hear from you. Thank you.
Okay, I'd just like to say that we were very prepared, and this case has been going on since 2019, and that seems like a long time to be able to come up with enough data. Anyway, we'll look forward to speaking to you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Isaacson. All right, commissioners, do we have a motion to accept staff's recommendation to take the matter off for staff's further review of materials submitted? Do we have a motion from, oh, Commissioner Park, I forgot about your statement. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'll make the motion too, because I think it's now in my district. And it's Mr. Dos Santos, right, for the D, our staff?
Yeah, it's Mr. De Los Santos.
Yeah. I wanted to compliment you on bringing this to our attention. And I want to be express about it because you're new to the presentation world here before us. You know, when you get new information like this that you think is important, you can take two paths. And path number one is to say, oh man, this has been taking a long time. People are bugging me about it. Let's just charge ahead and have a hearing. And then we have a hearing and then we talk about this new information and then we get uncomfortable about it and people are pointing fingers and then it all gets messed up. Or path number two is to say, you know, let's be patient. Let's do it right. Let's understand this information. Let's process it and let's get it right in our staff report. And then we'll have a better hearing. And you clearly made the decision to go to path number two. And I want to praise you for that. I really appreciate it. Also, I will make the motion to approve the withdrawal of this matter from the agenda to be reset on the agenda at a future time.
Thank you, Commissioner Park. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Farini. All right, Mr. Villalobos, is there any discussion by the commission on the motion before we go to a vote? I don't see any. So we're ready, Mr. Villalobos, for your roll call.
Commissioner Bridley,
Aye.
Commissioner Park,
Aye.
Commissioner Farini,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
Chair Cooney.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, staff, and thank you, members of the public, appellants, for your willingness to see this matter back again in the future. Okay. Do you want commissioners to take a brief break at this point or get into item 2 before we do? I guess, why don't we call item 2 and then see if we have any preliminary matters we can cover before we go to a break. That's okay.
All right.
Mr. Villalobos.
The following is a hearing on the request of Ivan Van Wingerden, applicant and owner, to consider case numbers 19 DVP 20, 22 CUP 5, 19 CDP 27, and State Secret Guidelines Section 15168C4, checklist for commercial cannabis land use entitlement and licensing applications.
Thank you, Mr. Villalobos. Okay, do we have any ex parte disclosures? Commissioner Park.
Yes, I had a meeting with applicant folks and team a couple of weeks ago. And I then thought about this and I realized I need to recuse myself from this matter. And I want to explain that. And it's, you know, I'm really disappointed to do that because I find these projects fascinating. I think both sides always speak very well, express themselves well. I think some of the project opponents display a lot of courage in taking the time to think this stuff through and say what they think. And I think sometimes I'm one of the most vocal members of the commission in digging into these and sometimes even voting against them. So I hate to recuse myself. On the other hand, I want to maintain the respect to the community and our independence and honesty. And looking at the FPPC regulations, I think I have to recuse myself. It's kind of embarrassing because normally I'm doing that because my law firm handled some big case for somebody or I represent someone. No, that's not this one at all. What this is that my youngest son is in the process of probably selling a puppy to prominent family that is involved in this project in some way, in that the puppy would be sold to an avocado ranch, and the residents there are involved in management of this project. Because my son lives at home, even though he's an adult, his actions are imputed to me as a dependent. And so it's as though I am personally doing this. And since the value of the puppy is over $500 under the FPPC regs, I am technically having a financial interest in this project. Now, probably some of you would say, oh, no one would have ever known about it, or that's so trivial. Why do you even spend your time thinking about things like that? But, you know, the law is the law. And I want to maintain that respect and credibility with all members of Carpinteria. And I don't want somebody to find out about this later and say, Park, what the hell was he doing? So I will be recusing myself. I wish you all the best of the luck while I go play on this beautiful sunny day. Because I remember on other matters where I recused myself that county council directed me to literally leave the Zoom call so that I don't watch it and make faces at you or call you up and things like that. So I will be signing off and wish you all good day.
Mr. Park, thank you for your disclosure, and we'll look forward to seeing you next week.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Any other commissioners with disclosures? Commissioner Bridley.
Yes, I had a conference call yesterday with Mr. Higgins and Mr. Van Wingerden and Ms. Colley. I hope I got this wrong. And I think Philip Green was on the call too, barely. So it was just the applicants team. That's the only people I've spoken to. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bridley. Commissioner Farini.
Thank you, Chair Cooney. Yes, I spoke briefly on Friday with Mr. Higgins on the project.
Okay. Commissioner Martinez, any disclosures?
None. None, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, you were muted there for a minute.
Oh, I have none.
Okay, thank you very much. I do have disclosure of a meeting Monday. I made a site visit to the premises and met with the applicants team.
Okay.
Sorry. Commissioner Martinez was on his court call, sorry. And Mr. Higgins led the tour. One of the owners, Yvonne Van Wingerden, was present. And there were others also part of the applicants team who were present. Don't see anybody else. I think that covers us all. So we're ready to move forward with staff's presentation.
Great, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the commission.
Good morning, Ms. Baylor.
You see the slides are up, so I'll go ahead and get started. Today, I'm presenting the 3508 Villa Real Cannabis Cultivation and Processing Development Plan, Coastal Development Permit, and Minor Conditional Use Permit. Next slide. The 8.96 acre property shown in purple is about 200 feet from Highway 101 and 100 feet from Villa Real. The parcels to the north and south contain applications for cannabis cultivation, as shown by the red dots on this slide. The project requires a development plan for over 20,000 square feet of development, a minor conditional use permit for packing and shipping, and a coastal development permit for a cannabis operation. Next slide. Here is an aerial of the property outlined in white. It is zoned Ag 110 and is surrounded by parcels with the same zoning that are developed with greenhouses and orchards. Access to the subject parcel is taken off of Villa Real. Next slide. Here is the parcel. Access will be provided to the west by an existing driveway and easement. Permitted greenhouses 1 and 2 are outlined in dark green. The processing, packing, and shipping area is outlined in light green and includes permitted and as-built development, with as-built development shown in orange. Red designates all development to be demolished, including greenhouses, processing area, water tanks, and a boiler in the 100-foot esh buffer area. The esh buffer limit is designated by a light blue dashed line. The as-built irrigation room that will contain a boiler is an orange rectangle south of greenhouse 2. As-built water tanks are orange circles, and 2 new water tanks are shown in blue. Chain link security fencing is shown with a dashed pink line, and wildlife-friendly barbed wire fencing is shown with a dotted pink line. Parking is shown in gray south of greenhouse 1. With the demolition of all development shown in red on the site plan, all as-built development within the 100-foot esh buffer will be removed. Next slide, please. Here you can see where 1.24 acres of new landscaping will be planted, shown in gray, white, and black circles. Next slide. And this slide highlights the areas to be planted in bright green so they're easier to see. The as-built development in the esh buffer will be replaced with riparian and native vegetation that will enhance and restore the area along Arroyo Paradon. New landscaping planted in the southwest corner will also further screen the project from Via Real. Next slide. The coastal development permit consists of 4.15 acres of cultivation in 2 permitted greenhouses and 0.19 acres of processing in a permitted processing, packing, and shipping building with as-built additions. Up to 50 employees from 6:30 to 3:30 p.m. Monday through Friday and 6:30 to 11 a.m. Saturday will park on site and be provided with incentives for ride sharing. The premises will be fenced and downward facing lighting will be installed. Landscaping will screen from Via Real and enhance the esh buffer. The OAP includes carbon filtration in the processing building and regenerative carbon scrubbers in the greenhouses. The project will use 11.33 acre-feet per year of water, which is less than the historic usage of 12.32 acre-feet per year for cut flowers. Water will continue to be provided by the Carpinteria Valley Water District. Next slide. As required by the Carpinteria Agricultural Overlay District, a minor conditional use permit is needed to allow a packing and shipping facility, which includes as-built additions to 2 permitted packing, shipping, and processing buildings located between 2 permitted greenhouses. The total area of the packing and shipping facility will be 12,379 square feet used for packing, shipping, processing, packaging, storage, office, restrooms, and employee break areas. Next slide. The project also requires a development plan to allow over 20,000 square feet of development. The development plan includes increasing the height of the greenhouses from 15 feet and 17 feet to 22 feet. 2 new water tanks and an underground detention system will be constructed. Almost an acre of development will be demolished, including as-built development in the 100-foot esh buffer. The development plan includes legalizing as-built additions to the permitted processing and packing building, an irrigation and boiler room, 4 water tanks, and 3 wastewater tanks. There will be 128 cubic yards of cut and fill. Next slide. As allowed by Article 2, the applicant requests a modification to the 20-foot southern property line setback and 100-foot setback from the Arroyo Paradon top of bank required by the Carpinteria Agricultural Overlay. The setback is shown with the dashed purple line, and the request for a modification applies to the development shown in purple. The permitted greenhouses within the 100-foot top of bank setback require the modification because they will be increased in height. 6 as-built and new water tanks require a modification because they are partially within the 20-foot southern property line setback. All development within the setback areas are in support of the cultivation operation, will not impact biological resources, and have been reviewed by the Coastal Commission, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, State Water Board, Fire Department, and the South Board of Architectural Review. Next slide, please. The project is consistent with the policies of the comprehensive plan, including the land use element, agricultural element, and the conservation element. Next slide. The project is also consistent with Article 2, including Ag 1 zone standards and the cannabis ordinance. The project includes a landscaping and screening plan to screen the project from public views, a lighting plan consisting of motion sensor light fixtures, fencing plan, site transportation demand management plan, habitat protection plan, wildlife movement plan, entry protection plan in compliance with the PEIR, and an odor abatement plan. Next slide. The project relies on the cannabis PEIR as documented by the checklist prepared pursuant to CEQA guidelines section 15168, and no additional environmental review is required. Next slide, please. Staff recommends that you make the required findings for approval, determine that the PEIR is adequate, and no additional environmental review is needed, and grant approval of the project subject to the conditions. And regarding attachment B3, the minor conditional use permit conditions of approval, conditions 13, 18, and 19 inadvertently had template language included, so staff has revised these conditions to reflect the project specific information, and we are displaying those revised conditions on this slide before you. So this concludes staff's presentation, and staff and the applicant are available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baylor. A lot of very detailed information in a hurry, so we may have questions. Don't see any hands up right now. Commissioner Bridley does. And you're muted, Laura.
Hi. Thank you. Very good staff report, very thorough. I just had a crazy busy week, and so I may have missed this, but where did you send us this 13, 18, 19 ahead of time, or maybe that came in an email attachment, or is that the first we're seeing it this morning?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Bradley, through the chair. This is the first you're hearing of this.
Okay.
Staff acknowledged it this morning.
Okay.
So, you know, we can look at the slide to see the exact language, but essentially these are standard conditions we apply to all minor conditional use permits. And the template language was not revised according to the project.
Okay, well, maybe you could just leave it up on a slide when we take a break. That might be a workaround situation for me to be able to read it in my tired brain. The other quick questions I had is that you said verbally, and I didn't see this on the slide, that the Coastal Commission already approved the modification request for setback changes. How is it that the Coastal Commission would have looked at it at all?
So the Coastal Commission has not approved the modification or the project, but the Coastal Commission has reviewed the project. We have regular Coastal Commission coordination meetings where we briefly present projects that may be coming down. You know, they may review them in the future at some point if they're in their appeals jurisdiction. So they reviewed this project a number of times.
Well, let me just follow up on that. So that means they reviewed everything, including the biological, you know, mitigation plan and the new planting in or to address the Arroyo Paradon location. So they saw the whole kit and caboodle. I mean, I'm not sure how much they spent looking into it deeply, but they understand that there's a fairly healthy, you know, creek restoration plan as part of this project then.
Commissioner Bardley, through the chair, I don't want to speak to what the Coastal Commission's understanding is necessarily, but I will say that during these coordination meetings, we presented the project and kind of high-level overview of the biological resource impacts and mitigations.
Okay. All right, that helps a lot. And then my last question is, to find a copy of the Transportation Demand Management Plan, where would I actually find that? I know it's cited in the condition, but is the actual plan part of an applicant material, or where does that live now?
Great question, Commissioner Bradley, through the chair. Thank you. So the site transportation demand management plan is incorporated in the plan set, which is included as attachment E to the staff report.
Okay.
And the traffic study that helps inform the STDMP is included as attachment H. to the
Yeah,
staff report.
I saw the traffic study. That's great.
Okay.
So it's just in the conditions. But I guess I used to see things that were kind of like a 3 or 4 page narrative of what the incentives were and where the preferred parking is. And so is it just included in the condition of approval? Is it an attachment to attachment B? You know what I mean?
So yes, so the plan itself is on sheet A .12 of the plan set. And the enforcement of the plan of the STDMP is outlined in the conditions of approval. So the conditions of approval and the plan, which is in the plan set, will be used to enforce the STDMP. And the plan set includes the details you're talking about the incentives and parking location.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question, if I may.
Sure, Commissioner Martinez.
I was looking at figure 5 and I really couldn't tell, and even from looking on the screen, is that are the fences that are being built, are they going to be in the creek, or are they going to be like those depicted in, I saw it on Appendix A, where there were some pictures of fences.
Thank you, Commissioner Martinez, through the chair, for your question. So there is fencing is going to be enclosing the cannabis premises. And as you see in the staff report and in the presentation, a portion of the permitted greenhouses that need to be fenced are within the ESH buffer. However, they're not in the creek. They're in that buffer area. So the chain link, a portion of the chain link fencing will be drawn in from its current location, because a lot of the development will be demolished and it's going to just abut the greenhouses. However, there is also a portion of fencing that will remain in its existing location, but it's instead of remaining as chain link fencing, which it is currently, it's going to be, and so you can see this, thank you for pulling up the slide, on the dotted pink line, kind of the northernmost pink line, you can see the location of the barbed wire fencing, and that's a wildlife friendly fencing as recommended by the biological resources assessment and the resource agencies to protect the creek from any sort of human activity.
Because in my mind, I've never heard of animal-friendly barbed wire, so I mean, it's just something that kind of mystifies me. But I guess in regards to the barbed wire that's putting in there, it's not going to be something that's going to, let's just say, if there's a flow, if I don't know this creek, but I'm imagining that at times there is a flow of water, and if debris will be held up by those fencing, will it cause, I'll just say like a mini dam or whatever. That's what I was thinking of.
All right, Mr. Chair, we're back on the air whenever you're ready to resume our hearing.
We are all ready to go. The applicant's presentation is next, but before we move to that, I'll just ask if anybody has a burning question to ask of staff before we move on. Don't see any, so we would invite the applicant to make its presentation at this time. Mr. Higgins.
Great. Thank you, Chair Cooney.
Morning, Mr. Van Ringer.
Am I on mute?
No, I can hear you. We can hear you fine.
Apologies, I had a slight snafu on my sound. Okay, just a moment. Good morning, members of the board and county staff.
Planning Commission.
Sorry, the Planning Commission. Excuse me. Do you mind pulling up the presentation that was sent in? Perfect. Thank you. So my name is Ivan Van Wingerden. I'm one of the owners of this property and the applicant. Thank you for the opportunity to present our Creekside project before you today. We've been working on this particular land use process for this project for over 3 years now, and I've combed over all the details to bring this property into compliance. This property consists of 2 separate greenhouse structures and a packing house. Next slide, please. With me today is Mike Palmer, our partner and board member, Philip Green, our president, Whitney Cawley, our vice president of compliance, Amanda Clark, our compliance manager, Jay Higgins, our land use advisor, Paul Schaefer, our odor and ambient air monitoring expert with SCS Engineering, and Jessica Peak, the project biologist of Store Environmental. Next slide, please. So just a quick history on this site. The first greenhouse and a portion of the packing house were originally constructed and entitled in 1973. And the second phase of the greenhouses were permitted and constructed in 1982. We leased and purchased this property from my uncle, and we started the land use process back in 2018 after the county ordinance was finalized. The impact to our company and the capital required to bring this property into present day compliance are significant and will take the better part of a year to finalize. But we are up to this challenge and we are looking forward to having this property in accordance and in excess of current codes. If approved, this project has every potential to be left better than we found it. Next slide, please. So some of the project benefits, as will be listed also by Jay Higgins, the structural and impermeable footprint of this property has remained virtually unchanged since 1982.
Mr. Van Wingerden, if you're talking, we can't hear you right now.
What is going
on? Give us 1 second.
What the heck just happened?
Now we can hear you, I think.
Okay, I apologize. I'd also gotten a weird notification from Zoom on my desktop. I'll jump back just a little bit just to make sure nothing was missed. So the impermeable footprint of this property has remained virtually unchanged since 1982. However, before there was an established ESH buffer, the zoning standards of today have become more rigorous. And so with that, some of the infrastructure that was built decades ago will need to be removed to conform with today's standards. All of the unpermitted buildings, concrete and ancillary structures within the ESH setback from Arroyo Creek are scheduled to be demoed and removed. We are seeking to permit the as-built work within the packing house, the irrigation room, and the water tanks. All these items are critical infrastructure for us and are needed for the property to function. Also included within this ambitious scope of work is a 1.25 native plant landscaping project, most of which is where greenhouses previously have been sitting. With these changes, the project will comply with the Carpinteria Ag Overlay, and we feel is consistent with the goals of this board. Next slide, please. And I'll now transfer the microphone over to Jay Higgins, our land use consultant, who will give a more in-depth detail and scope on the project. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Jay Higgins, and I'm representing on and the team here today.
We have some audio interference with your microphone, Mr. Higgins. I'm not sure if there's a way to turn off any other source you have nearby.
How's that?
Sounds good so far.
Okay. Additional highlights. So the project conforms to the original approval from 1982, except packing house improvements that honor today's ash buffer rules. In other words, no part of what the project includes is within the 100-foot buffer from the edge of riparian. We are removing a significant amount of greenhouse and concrete that hasn't been in place for several decades. In its place will be native landscape plantings well over an acre. There's an overall reduction in impervious area on the site, which improves stormwater conditions. We're effectively eliminating all activities from the in the northwest corner of the property by fencing it off and relocating the access road. So the project really ups the ante by overcompensating on buffer restoration. And just a point of clarification, we don't have any building area in the actual ash or environmentally sensitive habitat. This is all buffer area plantings. So choice of words, it's not exactly restoration because it's not in the ash. It's essentially new habitat because it's in the buffer. Point of distinction. We are relocating an outdated septic system on the southwest side of the parcel to the southeast side of the parcel, several hundred feet away from the creek and buffer area. And even though the property is not readily visible because it's an interior lot, we are adding substantial landscaping around the little peekaboo window to the side along Via Real that the BAR requested. And the project site, of course, will be upgraded with fire and building code improvements, rendering it safer and more accessible. So all of this combined with the greenhouse and vanity scrubber system make this a win-win project for the public. And we do ask for your support today. I'll turn it over to Phil, Mr. Green, but I could, after he's done, focus a little bit more on the fencing, if you like, if we have some time, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Higgins, we had questions about the barbed wire fencing in particular. So if you want to come back to that, it's up to you.
Yeah, I'll let Phil go now and then I'll come back.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you, Jay. You could mute your computer. Awesome. All right. Hold on 1 second. Sorry. Okay. Next slide, please. And Jay will come back to that after my presentation. One more slide. All right. I'm going to try to keep this on the shorter side since most of you are pretty familiar with our proposals. But before diving into our specific odor control plans for Creekside, I want to again take a moment to briefly talk about and reiterate our community commitment when it comes to odor. Our responsibility to community on odor doesn't end once we've installed the scrubbers that we're going to discuss here shortly. As part of our odor abatement plan, we'll directly receive and respond to odor incidents reported by our neighbors and continually evaluate our installed systems, operations, and respond to any complaints to thoroughly investigate and resolve any issues. Part of the monitoring portion of this whole plan relies upon the continued development, testing, and implementation of improved odor measuring and monitoring technologies and methodologies. As we're all painfully aware, currently in the field, measurement of odor relies upon individual and subjective noses, as was discussed a little bit earlier by the planning director when trying to figure out who's responsible for odor. We're committed and focused on finding an objective and quantitative measurement of either odor surrogates or total odor directly in the field to ideally ensure that odor limit exceedances are detected before impacts are reported to us by neighbors. Next slide, please. Highlighted in green is the Creekside Blooms Nursery and its proximate location to residential neighborhoods. Because of our location with respect to these sensitive receptors, it was imperative that we become leaders in odor management within carp growers, and we're eager to work with the community, subject matter experts, as well as go beyond industry standards when it comes to greenhouse odor control. Next slide, please. Our processing building will be used primarily for product storage, quality assurance, and packaging, and we'll be bolstering the current carbon scrubber system we have with carbon filtration on all HVAC exhausts, as well as tightening up the total leak area of the building by using vapor barriers, sealing around wall penetrations, and strict adherence to our best management practices to include keeping doors closed when not in use, minimizing the time that cannabis is in transit between the greenhouse and the processing area, etc. Next slide, please. Venting of the greenhouse is an essential part of the efficient control of the growing environment and what allows for the economically efficient and environmentally friendly methods of growing that occur here in Carpinteria. Being able to exchange that warm, humid air with cooler air is a vital method used for temperature and humidity control without needing air conditioning or forced air heating and drying machines and the requisite energy requirements therein. That air exchange is also the highest part or the hardest part of our odor control compared to the processing spaces or other more traditional indoor cannabis cultivation locations. This drives the need to reduce the load of odor within the greenhouse prior to that air mass being exchanged with the outside environment via the greenhouse vents. We will be installing scrubbers into the Creekside Nursery greenhouse in the coming months, well before the issuance of our business licenses. Not because we have to, but because we want to, as good neighbors, truly do all that we can to reduce odor as quickly as we can. After initial installation and testing, we'll continually evaluate the performance of these scrubbers based upon internal odor monitoring, any complaints we receive, and scientific follow-up testing about a month after the initial commissioning, as well as during our first harvest period after issuance of the business license. The science supports that reduction of the odor load within the greenhouse will dramatically and perceptibly decrease the odor impacts in the surrounding area and community. Next slide, please. Here you can see our site plan overlaid with red dots that represent the locations of the scrubbers. We'll be installing 40 of these scrubbers over the coming months throughout the greenhouses to affect the reduction in odor load. Next slide, please. What you see here is the Creekside location again, the close neighborhoods overlaid with data from the EPA-approved Arroyo dispersion modeling software. This software is used by SCS engineers, combining 3 years of local weather history, the surrounding topography, and calculated odor concentrations will be measured by an odor panel to determine where the worst 1 hour average impacts will be for any given year with the scrubbers. As we've discussed before, the gold standard when it comes to measuring odor in an objective and repeatable procedure is using accredited odor panels to analyze these odor samples that have been taken on site and sent to the odor laboratory. This measurement is done with the objective of quantifying the smell of a given sample in terms of human perception. A group of accredited noses are impaneled without any description of the location, nature, or reason the sample was taken to smell the sample at varying concentrations. Initially, the sample is mixed with a large amount of clean air, and slowly the amount of sample being mixed into the clean air is increased until each of the odor panel members has reached a sufficient concentration level that they've been able to detect the sample odor. The average dilution ratio of free air to odor sample at which the odor panel as a whole detected the odor is the reported odor concentration, or D/T. Generally, the higher the reported odor concentration, the stronger the odor is. Of note, SCS engineers has found the general average Carpinteria cannabis greenhouse in the flowering areas near the top of the plants to have an odor concentration of approximately 3,400 D over T. As you can see, the outermost area of the plot here represents 10 D over T, or about the average background odor level throughout Carpinteria during the last 5 years that SES has been doing surveys in the area. Using this greenhouse vent emission odor limit of 499 D over T from our odor abatement plan, the models predict no odor impacts from the greenhouse at nearby residential areas. During initial testing and follow-up testing, this 499 D over T number can and will be used as a benchmark for compliance testing and indication if Creekside is contributing to future odor complaints. When multiple farms are possible sources of odor, the ability to measure D over T and employ modeling to analyze the possible contribution to offsite odor incidents will be useful tools in having an objective, scientifically based method to define suspected odor offenders. Next slide, please. In early 2002, we were introduced to a company out of Holland that had a proposed prototype carbon scrubber specifically designed for the greenhouse environment. It utilized cutting-edge filtration concepts and promised increased longevity of the carbon life. We decided to move forward with the construction of a small number of prototypes to conduct a small-scale test at this greenhouse. The prototype scrubbers were finally delivered in early 2021 and deployed for testing. Working with SES engineers as well as several other third-party engineering companies, efficacy testing was conducted over the course of several months. The initial tests within the greenhouse demonstrated 81 to 87% odor reduction within the greenhouse overall, and single-pass odor reduction of around 96% through the scrubber itself. These extremely encouraging results prompted us to work with the supplier to further develop the scrubbers into a smaller form factor that would better work for the style of greenhouses we have here at CARP. We quickly followed that small-scale testing program with an order of sufficient scrubbers to outfit our currently operating greenhouses here in Carpinteria with 10 scrubbers per acre and are in the process of receiving and installing them. And we have fully installed the scrubbers into the entirety of two of our Carpinteria greenhouses, including Everbloom, where a full-scale test of these scrubbers is currently being conducted. The testing is spread across 3 different weeks to obtain an initial baseline of odor at the vents, the initial impact of the carbon scrubbers once turned on, as well as a follow-up phase in about 4 weeks after the commissioning of the scrubbers. All 3 of these phases include a harvest of mature plants to ensure the worst-case odor conditions within the greenhouse are studied. Comparing the results from the initial scrubber phase and the follow-up phase with the baseline will allow us to determine the real-world efficacy of the scrubbers towards the compliance with the 499 D over T limit proposed in our OAP. After completion of this testing, we'll continually evaluate the performance of the scrubbers based upon internal air monitoring, odor monitoring, any complaints, and scientific follow-up testing about a month after, as well as during that first harvest. I'm confident that we're on the right path as an industry and community to see drastic odor improvement in the coming months and year as more and more farms in the Carpinteria area adopt and implement new technologies like the one we have selected. The agreement with the coalition, our odor abatement plan, and the community guidelines further strengthen the requirements of the cannabis ordinance to ensure that we are held to the commitments we are making before you today. Next slide, please. Thank you again for allowing us the time to explain how we got to be where we are today and what sets our project apart. I'm going to hand it back over to Jay to address some questions.
Jay, do you mind if I ask a question of Mr. Green at this point?
Go ahead.
Mr. Green, on the chart of the location of the scrubbers, at least theoretically, it appeared there were only 2 in the packing house portion, the processing place. And what was the thinking behind placing only 2 in what we've been led to believe on other projects is a source of odor?
So the way that works is there's actually 3 in the processing area. And what is done is our HVAC and odor engineers basically look at the volume of the building and, you know, the height, width, length, all that good stuff. and figure out how many CFM are needed for turnover to sufficiently negatively pressurize the facility so that any air escaping is only through the carbon scrubbers.
Okay, thank you. Were there other questions that commissioners had to put to Mr. Green at this point, or do you want to save until the applicant's done? Okay, Mr. Higgins, back to you.
Okay, so maybe Mr. Villalobos, if you could give us a different, whoever's manning the exhibits, we could bring up the project plans. That's, I think in the file, it's attachment E. It's not in the presentation, it's an attachment if you want to go. There you go. And go to sheet 9. Okay, so let's try to do this. Who has control of the cursor on your end, Mr. Chair?
Jay, this is Mr. Dargle. I have control of the cursor.
Okay, so if you want to put the cursor to the left of the packing house on the fence line, about where that dashed line is, just west of the packing house. And I'm having trouble seeing your cursor if it's there. Yeah.
Jay, there isn't a laser pointer option on this at this
right
view. I can download. It may take a few minutes to download the presentation and do it that way.
That's okay. Try just taking your cursor and placing it at that part of the property that on the top of Bank, where there's a transition to a new road.
So the cursor is showing on the computer screen, but it looks like it's not actually showing on the TV, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah.
So. Jay, are you just trying to point out this transition?
Yeah, I'm trying to explain or narrate where we're transitioning from a chain link. The western greenhouse has chain link at the esh boundary on the north side of the road. And as you move from west to east, right before you get to the packing house is where our restoration plan starts. And the fence that follows the top of Bank will become barbed wire. And the north side of the road is where we'll install new chain link. So maybe a better picture to show, Joe, is going to be sheet 21 in the plan set.
Okay, give it just a second to load.
So that is a landscape sheet for the eastern side of the property. On the very left side of that sheet where we start the landscaping program, that's right about where the fencing changes. On the south side of the landscape palette there is chain link. And the north side is where there's going to be the barbed wire wildlife friendly fencing. I realize that may be an oxymoron, but we have never had or experienced any flooding above the top of the bank there. So there's no way, even during the Thomas debris flow, any flooding crested the top of bank there. So there would be no way the barbed wire would capture any debris. But we do want to demarc the top of bank and segregate that area there that's restoration of the buffer, because we do get people that will walk in the creek and they need to know essentially where the property line is and that they're not allowed to cross through that easily. But it is an approved fencing type for wildlife passage. So that's why it's barbed wire, not chain link. I hope that tries to address the question. It's kind of hard to narrate, but we can answer any other questions you might have about that.
Mr. Martinez, does that clarify matters for you at all?
Yeah, it helps me clarify, but it still remains, does this creek that it's in, does it ever have any flow of water?
There's flow of water in the creek, but never up the bank.
Okay, so the barbed wire fence we're talking about is on the bank, not
Yes.
within the.
Correct, it's not within the creek.
Okay, so the instance of my question being, well, will debris be caught within the barbed wire is not real because it's not in the flow of water.
That's correct. It's at the top of the bank.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Who's next for the applicant?
That concludes our presentation. We have other experts here.
Okay. Questions of any of the applicant's team from commissioners? Commissioner Briley.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Higgins, for trying to narrate that without a cursor. But I really appreciated the clarity. You know, you mentioned somewhere in your comments about agreement with the or maybe it was Mr. Green, agreement with the coalition. So I'm just wondering, is that part of this at all? I mean, are you part of some sort of an agreement with the Coalition for Responsible Cannabis, or how is that affecting your project description / operations moving forward?
Yeah, so we are our growers, and our growers working with the coalition. We're a signer to the agreement. Our OAP integrates all of the elements of what's commonly referred to as the model OAP, as well as adopting the community guidelines. So, you know, on top of the original ordinance, you know, odor requirements and reporting and all that, you know, receiving complaints and responding to them, the agreement that the carpet growers came to with the coalition really raises the bar. So the onus isn't on the county to be the mediator. It's on the operator to take those in as an industry, take the complaints and observations and react to them, investigate, explain, prove, you know, all the things that are expected of us as good neighbors. So that is part of our OAP and project description.
Okay, thank you. I forgot about that. It's a blanket. Everyone in carp growers is part of that agreement. So we're not hearing for when it's first started, you know, we're hearing about it on a case-by-case basis. So thank you for that clarification. I didn't have any other questions.
Okay. Anyone else? Questions for the applicant at this point? All right.
Mr. Chair, if we have no other questions, I do want to maybe reserve some time if it's possible, in case we'd like to respond to any public comment.
You'll have a chance to do that.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Villalobos, we're ready for public comment.
Our first speaker will be Dustin Hoyseth, to be followed by Ana Carrillo.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Dustin Hoyseth with the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce. Thank you, Planning Commissioners, for your time. On behalf of the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce from Goleta to Carpinteria, we wish to express our support for Creekside and their permit applications. Cannabis is an integral piece of the local agricultural sector and the Santa Barbara County economy. Our organization advocates for responsible member businesses who contribute to the local economy and jobs. We believe that cooperation between local government and businesses supports a thriving community and economy. The Chamber has worked with the cannabis farmers group CARP Growers to educate our members about responsible cannabis farming. We've been impressed by the significant efforts that have gone into controlling cannabis odors, as well as the environmental consideration paid by local greenhouse farms. The investments these businesses have made to comply with regulation and ensure that their farms fit in with local communities should not go unnoticed. These permit applications are further evidence of those efforts. Cannabis farmers in Carpinteria Valley have operated successfully for the past 5 years, and members of CARP growers like Creekside have continually set an example for complying with regulation. With continued county support, these businesses will continue to build a strong foundation for responsible cannabis farming and countywide economic development. We ask that you support Creekside's permit applications, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Hoyseth.
So our next speaker will be Anna Carrillo, to be followed by Maureen Claffey.
Good morning, Planning Commission. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Ms. Creo, there's a little bit of interference, but it's temporary. I just wanted to remind public speakers that we're allowing 3 minutes for each speaker this morning. So I didn't want to have you misled about the time.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I missed the beginning of the meeting. Would have liked to have heard what Director Plowman said about being able to find the source. But I'll have to listen to that later. This project abuts Arroyo Creek, and I'm pleased to see that the structures that were built without permits located too close to the creek will now be demolished, but there still remains 41,000 square feet that will be allowed to remain in the 100-foot esh. The 41,000 square feet should not be permitted. Growers need to suffer consequences for being able to get permits after the fact. It's one thing to build without a permit, but to build in an esh is inexcusable. I remember when this project first submitted their application and a neighbor in La Mirada alerted Steve Mason about the buildings in the esh. The growers are used to growing with impunity. Another reason for not allowing any development this close to the creek is that if one looks at Arroyo Creek at Foothill Road /192, the water running there is clean and pristine. But after traveling past this greenhouse operation and 4 others, the water at Villa Real is no longer clean and pristine. So something is happening to the quality of Arroyo Creek as it travels to the beach. The BAR voted to increase the height of the 2 greenhouses from 15 feet to 22 feet, but that decision was only passed by 1 vote. There was concern about the increased height from the freeway and the fact that the surrounding greenhouses aren't this tall. The picture for this project shows there are about 7 other projects in this area. Most have already received their CDPs, but the problem for the La Mirada EDRN, the Hillside EDRN, where the odors seem to settle located right above these low-lying cannabis projects, is it's beyond the 1,000-foot notification area. The notification area for this project should be extended to include the La Mirada EDRN, which is 1,365 feet away from this project. The whole La Mirada EDRN should be included for the odor notification rules. The lack of being able to identify the source of an odor is still a major problem here in Carpinteria. Though the permit will state that within the first year, there will be quarterly inspections by an independent certified hygienist to verify there are no odors being experienced in residential areas, this is still not occurring. The one fully permitted cannabis operation in this area, which smells, has not been identified as the one that is causing the problems for the residents in the La Mirada EDRN. No one at the county nor in the neighborhood can fingerprint which operation is causing the nuisance health problem. The community was promised that once cannabis operations were permitted, odor complaints would be taken care of. But without some sort of fingerprint for each operation, that is still not possible. And though the operator can verify there are no odors on his place at ground level, one doesn't know what is coming out of the open vents and being blown by the wind around. There are currently 50 employees and the projection is for 50 employees for 39 parking spaces. The traffic report states that 70% of them are coming from the south. Please increase the requirement for the use of more than one van to pick up employees coming from the south of Carpinteria. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Carrillo.
Our next speaker will be Maureen Claffey, to be followed by Peter Dugray. Oops. Ms. Claffey?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Great. My name is Maureen Claffey. I represent a grassroots organization called Save the Arroyo Paradon Watershed. I'm here to speak on behalf of the creek. It sounds like there's quite a few of you that are not familiar with Arroyo Paradon Creek. I invite you once again, planning commissioners, to come and take a tour with our little grassroots nonprofit. We've taken other people on tour. You're welcome to come to the creek. So let this be an open invitation once again. I know that many of you have probably met with Creekside Blooms folks, so it seems only fair to come look at the creek from our perspective. From our perspective, this creek is already considered a quote-unquote impaired water body. That means it's already got environmental degradation based on the historic greenhouse grows. The chemicals that have been found in the creek are a result of those flower growing operations. So let's talk about the animals, the endangered species specifically, that are impacted by this operation. Steelhead trout are considered critical habitat for steelhead trout. Arroyo Paradon is a critical habitat for steelhead, sorry. Steelhead use their sense of smell to spawn. Okay, right now, the steelhead are being bombarded by a single smell, cannabis. We know that impairing their sense of smell is going to impair their ability to spawn. What I'd like to see is for this organization to submit a habitat protection plan in their plans that includes consideration for not only steelhead trout, but also the federally endangered tidewater goby found in Arroyo Paradon, and red-legged frogs, and many other endangered plants and animals. Also, with regards to the creek bed, we know that creeks jump their banks. This area is a 100-year floodplain. One of your speakers said it's never flooded. That's untrue. Our family has had a house in this area, and it has flooded before, and it just depends on where the creek clogs. The water will come out where it wants to come out. The last thing I want to point out that Mr. Van Wingerden pointed to a falsehood, which I've known since this project began, which is that they were not operating cannabis before 2016. And Mr. Van Wingerden acknowledged the false affidavits in his statement. The timeline here, he said, they started in 2018, and that's when they leased and purchased the land, and that they've been working on their application for 3 years. That's 2019. So the false affidavits, they had to be growing before 2016. So he's just basically admitted that they've lied on their affidavits. And I think that's very, very, very important to look at, because that's a felony offense to lie on your affidavits. And I would have your legal counsel take a look at that. That's no small thing. I know that other countywide pot operations have been shut down because of their false affidavits. Lastly, it still stinks in this neighborhood. This project is one of 4 operations directly touching the creek. You've already approved 2. Your body has approved 2. The smell has not improved upon having legal permits. I would ask again that we have a moratorium on rushing these projects through until the creek is properly protected, until the false affidavits are investigated, and until there's an enforcement mechanism in place to look at the smells. One of their speakers said, oh, we're going to do everything we can to take care of smells. Well, that was always the cannabis regulations state that that's always been, the onus has always been on the grower to make sure that smells do not leave the property line. He's not a hero for saying, oh, now we're going to suddenly take care of things once we get this regulations. They have always needed to make sure that smell does not leave the property line. And I want you to think of the steelhead trout, which we're trying to bring back desperately. We've poured thousands of dollars into trying to bring these animals back. And now, because of the smell problems, they're not going to be able to spawn on this creek. And it is a creek that has water in it today as we speak. There is water in that creek. It is dry during the summer months, but in the winter months and in the springtime, it's a beautiful, beautiful waterway. I'm happy to show you around. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Claffey.
Our next speaker will be Peter DeGray, to be followed by Ted Hamilton.
Good morning, Chair Cooney, Planning Commissioners. I'm happy to say that it's another beautiful postcard day in Carpinteria Valley. I'm here on behalf of carp growers this morning, the local cannabis farmers group of 10 members. The group was established in 2018, and Creekside Farm and Yvonne Van Wingerden team are original carp growers members, and really been committed to raising the bar in the local cannabis farming industry by setting the best practices and through their just long-term determination for fixing odor. So we ask today that you please support Creekside's application to switch crops and bring some of the improvements at the property up to code with the county cannabis ordinance. This farm was formerly part of a thriving cut flower industry in Carpinteria for decades. The crop switch to cannabis is a win-win. It's leading to reinvestment at a property that needed it, and it will keep this property in agriculture into the future. The project also carries the added benefit of habitat restoration along Arroyo Creek. Cannabis has led to a massive reduction in pesticide use in this area. And as we know, greenhouse farming is extremely efficient, especially in conserving precious resources like water through recycling, irrigation, and reusing that water. Creekside and its operators stand out for their professionalism and for their generations of success in the commercial agricultural industry. They bring that expertise into cannabis farming, and we can all appreciate that. They're driven to make their farm succeed in a way that's good for the community, great for their employees, and for their neighbors. Evidence of their superlative efforts come with their pushing the envelope in odor control and really being responsible for developing purpose-built scrubbers from the ground up, and these are showing great promise. Their odor abatement plan was completed in partnership with the Coalition for Responsible Cannabis as the way forward for cannabis to be farmed in Carpinteria in a way that's compatible with the community. So I thank you for your time and consideration today. Please approve Creekside's application to farm cannabis and make modest improvements at the agricultural property and for supporting and standing with local farms.
Thank you, Mr. DeGray.
Our next speaker will be Ted Hamilton, and then we have one telephone speaker who I believe is Mr. Chatillo, but I'm not sure. Mr. Hamilton, did you have anything you wanted to share, or were you just listening?
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I'm only observing today. I have no comments on the project. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. Moving on to our telephone caller. Hit *6 on your phone to unmute yourself.
Good morning, members of the Planning Commission, Chair Cooney. This is Mark Chatillo, and I am speaking today on behalf of the Santa Barbara Coalition for Responsible Cannabis. As you know, the goal of the coalition is to create a sustainable cannabis industry in Santa Barbara. Knowing that this industry was approved by the voters, and both statewide and locally, and the supervisors have adopted an ordinance, we're doing our very best to ensure that the impacts from this industry are minimized and it is a sustainable industry that can have a future in our community. In Carpinteria, the biggest issue, of course, is odor, and we have focused on that issue. The comprehensive agreement or contract that is attached to our comment letter provides a no-fail process to ensure that odor from the cannabis cultivation facilities, including the project that's before you today, will be controlled. And this particular grow is one of the more advanced that is relying exclusively on carbon scrubbers and not using the deodorant system to neutralize odors in the air, but rather to intercept and sequester odor-causing compounds at the facility so that it does not cause impacts beyond its property lines. The agreement provides a comprehensive odor response process that is part of the odor abatement plan that is before you with this project, and a set of community odor guidelines that are intended to help address the question of what source is responsible for an odor episode in the community. The agreement provides that odor should be contained at the property line and there should be no odor detectable in publicly accessible locations. All standards that go well beyond the county's ordinance, but are part of the voluntary agreement that Creekside and the other members of the Carpinteria Association for Responsible Producers, CARP growers, have committed to with the coalition through an enforceable contract. As a result of their participation in this and I need to call out the leadership for this project, for the Creekside project, who are also the leadership for several other projects that have been before your commission and have been approved, that these are the folks that have invested considerable resources to try and advance and successfully advance the technology for odor detection and odor control, which really is a foundation for this groundbreaking comprehensive agreement. So the coalition is before you today to offer its support for this project because of all of these commitments to ensure that odor will not be a problem at this facility. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission.
Thanks, Mr. Chisello.
And Mr. Chitillo was our last speaker.
All right, very good. So, Mr. Higgins, it's back to you for comments on public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have appreciated Ms. Correa's engagement on these projects, and she brings always very good, concise, and relevant questions to the table. So let me walk through some of the things she brought up. With respect to water quality, I think the best way to answer that is this project and the other cannabis projects that are adjacent to this creek are highly regulated, way more regulated than the other traditional ag operations are that line this creek. In particular, Regional Water Quality Control Board sets way different standards for cannabis projects than the other traditional crops that are grown adjacent to Arroyo Paradon. CDF, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, has been to this property several times to review the stormwater controls, and we'll have additional stormwater controls condition on the project. With respect to the height increase that we did get garner the Board of Architectural Review support for, just to note, the increase to 22 feet is still below the height limit of 30. It is an interior lot and is very difficult to see. We did put up story poles. In fact, the story poles are still site visit, modest increase, and it's pretty far away from the road, and there's significant vegetation intervening between the road and the parcel. So it's not possible to see the roof height increase or the story poles. And we did add landscaping, view corridor that is the driveway entrance. So traffic, we do have, we've met the standard in terms of using of Calvin and getting on the site. Part of what we intend, as you know, is to locate a lot of the processing activities offsite. And so we expect that what's before you here is a maximum number of employees. So keep that in mind. And we had that conversation on some other projects too before you with the same relocation of processing activities offsite, some but not all. The odor comments are relevant and poignant, but to note, there still is the real big time lapse in between compliance and where we are all at. I think at this point, there's still only about 5% of the acreage in Carpinteria that's been fully permitted and licensed. So we still just don't have the right compliance tools in place for the whole valley. Okay, so we're getting there. A lot of the applicants have gotten through the land use process, but they still need to get through the licensing process. So there's a lag time. And lastly, there must be a misunderstanding because Ms. Correa brought up that we are trying to get approved an additional 41,000 square feet of as-built structures, and that's not the case. And if we'll have Ms. Baylor try to confirm that for us, but that's got to be a misunderstanding. The comments by Ms. Claffey are again hard to stomach, but I want to make a point of the affidavit issue she brought up. Yvonne's statement and slide indicated we started the process, we started the permit process in 2019, but they were growing in a non-conforming state in 2015. So just to clear the record on that allegation. And we're still here for any other questions that come up, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Higgins, I had a list too, and you covered all the points, including Ms. Claffey's concern with the timing. There was a question of noticing that we'll discuss with staff. Anyone else on the commission have final questions for the applicant?
I do.
All right, Commissioner Martinez.
I'm new to this, so I'm going to ask maybe some neophyte questions, but this whole thing about the scrubbers and the odor, am I hearing that there is a recognized solution, or this is a process that is being addressed and better solutions are coming up to reducing the odor?
Yeah, so originally just to do a quick rundown of odor control for you, started off with misting systems, which are high pressure nozzles around the greenhouse that misted and eventually evaporated once misted to meet with the odor. That proved grossly insufficient. So we moved on to a vapor system, which was at the time the best available. And basically that vaporizes the neutralizer prior to dispersal around the greenhouse. That was in 6 to 8 inch PVC pipe all the way around the greenhouse that created a curtain that mixed with the odor and would neutralize a good amount, but not quite enough, nor was it acceptable to the community that we were adding additional VOCs to the surrounding environment, which prompted us to continue the investigation and go with the prototype scrubber early last year, do the small scale testing, and we're in process of installing full scale latest generation of carbon scrubbers, which are inside the greenhouse. And typically in indoor grows or in a processing area, you can negatively pressure it by using the carbon to basically suck out the contents of the room. So there's a pressure differential between the inside and the outside. So all the air outside is trying to come through all the holes instead of leaking out of the holes. That is pretty much unfeasible in a greenhouse, just given the volume and the required pressure that would be there. The cubic feet per minute that would be needed is a lot. The power draw for that is a lot, and it negates all the benefits that a greenhouse provides for growing efficiently and in an environmentally friendly manner.
Okay, so this is a prototype, meaning this is something that's being looked into and it hasn't been.
So yeah, so we're kind of it's half one, half the other. So We did prototype testing last year, did a couple refinements to the prototype, went full scale with production, and the first location where it's fully installed is Everbloom, which is, as everyone knows, that was in the hearing very close to the high school. We're on the second week of full scale testing right now. I expect to have data on the first round of tests next week, and then we'll do that follow-on testing at the end of March for that kind of confirmatory round. But we're confident enough in the results that we saw in the prototype testing that we've ordered enough to actually cover all of our greenhouses preemptively. So this is kind of the last 3% of confidence versus the first 90% that we had in the first round.
Okay, so with the results that you're receiving, is this a situation where the odors are going to be completely nullified? Nobody's going to smell it at all. It's going to be like any other business.
That is certainly the goal, and what the modeling and our results so far suggest. In the prototype tests that we did early last year, we saw about on average, about 85% reduction in odor within the greenhouse, which means the concentration, if you will, of the odor is 85% less before it even leaves the greenhouse. So with dilution, the site plan we showed with the model, that outer ring is basically where we come back down to background levels of just normal outside smell, and just outside the property line.
So my knowledge of scrubbers is basically that there is, when you scrub something, you're going to have a residue that's going to be left from it. I mean, you're taking something out, whether it turns into a gas or a physical substance. What is the residue we're talking about here, and what is done with it?
So there's two pieces to the filtration technology. The first kind of half is for particulate matter, some of which benefits us in reducing the spread of bacteria, molds, and fungus. Bacteria, virus, and fungus, but also those particles also contain odor. So that kind of clears the way for just truly gas, in the second half of the filtration stage, where there's these carbon canisters with lights down the middle that collect, but then also oxidize the odor molecules. So it's a gas that is a result, and with perfect oxidation, you'd have nothing but water and carbon dioxide coming out. Obviously, we try to get as close as we can in the carbon and light section, and then we have one more filter that collects those remnants that are not fully oxidized into a third stage filter that's after the carbon to further enhance the filtration quality.
Okay, so those filters, how are they disposed in any particular manner, or?
They're the particulate ones. The first two stages are cleanable, and then the carbon itself in the third stage. The third stage is cleanable. The carbon, our goal is to protect that, because the operational cost of a traditional scrubber is, once it's full, it gets sent off and rebaked and remade and then sent back. With traditional carbon in this kind of odor load, they'd last about 3 weeks before they need to be replaced, which cost and operationally just didn't make sense. So the kind of the big step on this one is that the carbon is so protected, the manufacturer thinks it could last 5 to 10 years before needing replacement. And that's really the big change in technology for us.
Okay, but I'm still not hearing, how are they disposed of? I mean, do they have to go to a particular landfill, or?
No, they'll go back to a company that can handle that kind of thing, and either clean it out, and what they do is basically take the carbon and bake off everything that's on there, collect that, and then they can reuse that carbon in additional canisters.
Okay,
and that's not done on site.
So what I'm hearing is this is kind of like the primary, secondary, and tertiary treatment of something.
Exactly.
Three stages. So then in that light, so let's go down the path of, you go down this prototype and it just doesn't work. What guarantees or what acts are you committing to say, look, if this doesn't work, we're still going to go to that next step, whatever comes to? What is that part of this contract I'm hearing about, or?
That's exactly right. So no matter the technology that a signatory on the contract and agreement agrees to, if whatever they propose, bring forward, looks great, you get it in there and it does 90% of the job, that commitment is not to say, well, we have the best available, so we're done until something better comes along. It's to work as an industry together to improve it. And for us specifically, We started with 10 scrubbers per acre. You know, if it looks like we're getting, and I'm just picking numbers, 85% of the job done, we'll increase that density up to, 12 an acre and do another round of testing and see if that's sufficient. If that is, great for us, it's going to be 12 an acre. If it's not, maybe we'll have to go to 15 an acre. Our OAP also provides for, if it's found to be insufficient, we can re-energize our vapor phase system as an additional stopgap, not as a permanent fix, but just an additional effort to really make sure we're taking care of those odors until we find how to get to that 100%.
And is this self-regulated? In other words, there's no third party, or is this just you self-regulating yourself to this agreement to?
Well, it starts off internally. Obviously, we have the coalition to hold our feet to the fire, if you will, as well as the county. We're obligated to, every time we receive a complaint via this new agreement mechanism, we inform, hey, thanks for giving us this. We're looking into it. When we find an answer or don't, we still have to communicate both to the complainant, the coalition, as well as the county. So everybody's working together. It's a transparent process instead of, you send a complaint in and hope something gets done about it.
Well, thank you. Thank you for answering my question, Mr. Green.
Mr. Chair, staff would like to just clarify something really quick on the record.
Hi, Mr. Dargill. Ms. Baylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the commission. Yeah, I want to clarify that there is no development in the environmentally sensitive habitat area. The 41,000 square feet of development to remain in the ESH buffer was permitted in the 1980s and 70s prior to adoption of the ESH buffer. And all of the development that was constructed without permits will be removed, and only development that is already permitted will remain in the permitted building footprint. I also just want to clarify that the project does include a habitat protection plan, a wildlife movement plan, and a tree protection plan, all of which include measures to prevent significant impacts to Arroyo Paradon and environmentally sensitive habitat. And the 55,000 square feet of new riparian native vegetation will benefit the ESH buffer by restoring habitat and will also act as a buffer in the case of flooding. And the last thing I want to clarify is that all noticing was conducted as required by Article 2, including mailed notices for all owners and occupants within 1,000 feet of the property.
And Ms. Baylor, on that last point, because noticing is such a priority of the commission, if people are interested in getting notice about a particular project's process through the county, they can always register their address, can they not?
Yes, that's right. And we did have some interested parties specific to this project. So we made sure that all of those interested parties also received the noticing for the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else from staff in response to the applicant's presentation?
Mr. Chair, I did want to just clarify really quick in regards to the discussion that was just had about the odor abatement plans. So separate from the agreement, this private agreement, the county has the ordinance that requires an odor abatement plan for each project. The odor abatement plan is a condition of approval, and it is not self-enforced. It is enforced by the county. So that is separate and distinct from this private agreement that was being discussed.
Thank you.
Mr. Dargill, thank you. That point is often lost in these discussions. The fact that the coalition has reached a contract with several of the growers is a fact, but it doesn't replace anything the county has responsibility to do. So I wanted at some point for you to make that clarification. Appreciate it. Anything else from staff? Mr. Wilson, did you have something?
Mr. Chair, I don't have any other comments. Thanks.
Okay. So we're at the point where we can proceed with questions from commissioners that haven't been asked in process. Make sure all the questions have been asked that need to be, and then we'll move to deliberations. Okay, not seeing any further questions, and knowing how much of this is based on prior knowledge, let's deliberate this project. Would you like to start, Commissioner Briley? No, okay. How about you, Commissioner Martinez?
No, no.
Okay, then we'll go to Commissioner Farini.
I'll do it.
Take it away, Larry.
Well, I have had the privilege, I would say, of being able to go down to Carpinteria and look at many of the projects and watched these projects evolve. This is a project that's taking huge strides, right? So they're going to invest a lot of money in this to make these carbon scrubbers work. And I think this is the third facility under the Van Wingerden flag there to do that. So I see a huge commitment, and I can't see why they would invest money in something that doesn't work. Without their investment, I don't know what was going to happen to those greenhouses. Many of them, through the economic crisis of the importation of cut flowers, they were going downhill and in disrepair. So these are all improvements to evolve, I think. So we are seeing an industry of evolution. And I think many people in the public are afraid of that. They know that the old way didn't work, and now we have somebody willing to invest for a better future. It's interesting, the Regional Water Quality Control Board and the extreme regulations they have on all of agriculture, and even more so on cannabis. That's one way to help clean things up, right? So there's a regulatory party there that is using their data to try to help clean things up, specifically for the surrounding bodies of water. So I'm very confident in actually regional waters probably overreach in regulation. So that should be a good one. It was fulfilling for me to hear from staff that CWFA has already been a part of the creek restoration and the ash restoration for this project. And that's another thing that without progress, there would be no funds to take care of that. So this new project, this new direction will allow for improvements. Maybe it won't be perfect, but it'll be a huge step in the right direction, or more progress, as we would say. Odor abatement, that seems to be the biggest one. And there again, carbon scrubbers. I like what the applicant's saying. Hey, if we're using one and that's not enough and we need two, then we'll go to two, and then we'll go to three. So it's a little bit of a tough plan, but they got to get it going before they know how it works. Looks like the background studies they've done on the odor and how it travels and where it travels is probably the best odor explanation I've seen in the shortest amount of time. It was very effective and very efficient for me. So with that, Commissioner Cooney, I would support this project.
Oh, thank you, Commissioner Farini. Very thoughtful comments. Commissioner Martinez, I would normally put pressure on you to go first, but Commissioner Farini was willing to jump in and help out. But as the newest commissioner, I know you have 1,000 questions. How do you feel about this project?
Well, I mean, my impression of this project, and again, like, this is new, and this is in reality the first project that I've ever had the opportunity to review. I'm encouraged by what they're saying in addressing the odor. It's an obvious situation. I mean, I live in the county. I've driven down there. I've smelled it, and And I'm very conscious of whether I would want something like that near me and living in a situation like that. It's here, but it sounds like the progression is to, I'm here, I'm going to be responsible, and that's what I like to hear and I like to see, and that this is not the end of the road in the sense of if it's not enough, what can we do next? Unfortunately, sometimes what happens in these situations, from what I can see, is that technology can only take us so far, and technology is at this point, and it may have some more to go, and allowing for that technology to take place and allow the growers to adjust to that new technology. That's what I'm looking for, and that's what I'm hearing will happen. And with that being said, I'm in favor of the project as it is.
Okay. Thank you. And thank you for your very appropriate questions, which we've all asked over the last months and years. But hearing it from you, it reminds us of how important the odor process is, the odor control process. Commissioner Briley.
Thank you, Chair Cooney, and I appreciate letting me gather my thoughts. So I also want to actually compliment Mr. Martinez, Commissioner Martinez, for some really good questions. It really helps to have those explained again, because this is a topic, you know, I'm a city planner by trade, and this is one of the most complicated things I've ever seen in planning in about 35 years. It's got lots of layers of issues. And I think the industry has pushed itself to improve technology implementation, and largely because the public has been so active in participating in all these meetings and hearings and changes to the ordinance. So your questions, having us, you know, remind where we are now is super helpful for me, even though I've sat through so many. So I always struggle with these. I struggle with them in Carpinteria, particularly because of the concentration. I don't struggle with them nearly as much in the North County, where you've got larger lots and possibly different kinds of ag intervening between cannabis growers. But here you have a pretty heavy duty concentration. And every time I say that I might support a case, I always put a caveat in that it doesn't mean that I'm going to support the next one. These are very, very site specific, which is one of the reasons why the programmatic EIR still sort of baffles me. However, staff has done a great job of giving us lots of good CEQA amended studies in their checklists. So we practically have our own little, mitigated NDs for each site. So given all of the material that the applicant has provided and all of the analysis, and I have a high respect for John Storrs, their biologist, you really can't get a more conservative biologist to do your restoration plan on this creek than Mr. Storr and his team. So that definitely swayed me. And I also, throw kudos to Mr. Green and Yvonne Van Wingerden and the whole team, because they have been the lead in the Carpinteria cannabis industry. In fact, my first visit to a cannabis farm before I was even put on the planning commission was to one site that Mr. Van Wingerden, hosted for the community to learn about the industry. And I found it very valuable and very forthcoming and very interested in trying to educate the community about this new crop that is, as we've seen a lot of public testimony, also saving some economics in Carpinteria. So with all that blah, blah, blah behind me, I am today inclined to support the case and looked at the findings and, all of them, and actually would agree with how they're drafted by staff. I think also want to make sure I compliment appropriately Ms. Baylor and Mr. Dargell, because this was a very long and exhaustive and thorough report. And so I'm inclined to support it. And I don't honestly see any need for additional changes to the project description or the conditions of approval or the findings after all this good discussion. So that's where I am, Commissioner Cooney.
Worth waiting for. Commissioner Riley.
Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, sorry.
Well, this is certainly an area of the county closest to me, and I feel a lot of weight to do the right thing for the people of the Carpinteria Valley who have struggled through this lost and found process of how to control the odor. I've admitted before, and I'll admit again, I had high hopes for the system of gas neutralization. People were willing to spend a lot of money to install and then operate these pipes around that had some success in neutralizing odor at landfills, and I thought we ought to encourage that. So with the first applications, we did, and the applicants were willing to put them up, and quite a few of the growers, as they came online, did so. But it is true, and the people of Carpinteria are a witness to the fact that not all of the cannabis grown in the Carpinteria Valley is subject to this same odor control that we see with this project and others, members of the Carpinteria growers. Not everybody is, and it is expensive, and not everybody's willing to spend it. Everybody's willing to make profit from the sale of cannabis grown in Carpinteria, but not all the growers are willing to go the extra step in consideration of the neighbors of each of these projects. I've said before, I'm a firsthand witness to the fact that the cannabis odors are consistently, regularly, and really at the nuisance level around the Carpinteria High School. And it is not going to be, I believe, gone until we have the kind of technology being applied by this applicant throughout the valley. And one right next door to this project is gone because of legal issues with the owner of the property, but it is gone, and it's a rarity that we see an improvement like that done where it's voluntary. It tends to be the county pressing forward, or in this case, the grower's landlord. But that is a bit far afield. I think this project checks the boxes in all the ways intended to make the odor nuisance, if not eliminated, reduced to the point where we can even improve the technology to eliminate it altogether if this doesn't. I do want to address the vicinity of a blue line important creek that drains the Carpinteria Valley. It did flood in places. The Arroyo Creek was recently improved in terms of its flow by the county, so that we didn't have a worse situation in January of 2018, but it still had water coming over the banks and mud coming over the banks. And my feeling is this project's willingness to improve with a restoration plan the buffer area next to the creek is going to be positive. Ms. Claffey has been a consistent prod to this commission to pay attention to the creek. And while I've been aware of various aspects, I would like to take her up on her offer to give me her point of view about what could be done with the creek. Her statement that the steelhead is affected by the cannabis odor in Carpinteria is alarming, and I will seek expertise in the staff of the county and in biologists to determine if that's the case, because we've had lots and lots of human victims, but I hadn't extended it to wildlife. All that said, I would like to make the motion to follow staff's recommendation and approve this project. I am heartened by the fact that all the procedures required for final approval here are still lined up ahead. They have our Board of Supervisors that always looks carefully. The Coastal Commission, this is in its appeal jurisdiction and has already been brought in by staff to prepare them for a possible appeal. So when it's all said and done, the licenses are issued and this project is fully online, I think it'll be a credit to the grower community. The recommended actions were in the staff report. We have them on the screen now. My motion would be to make the required findings for approval of the proposed project as specified in attachment A of the staff report. Staff report is dated today, March 2nd. We determined the previously certified programmatic environmental impact report, which is listed there, is adequate, and no subsequent environmental reviews required pursuant to SEQ guidelines 15162 and 15168C. And finally, that we grant approval of the project subject to the conditions included as attachments B1, B2, and B3, and as modified in today's hearing. Is there a second?
Yes, Commissioner Cooney, I second your motion.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Farini. Further discussion by the commission?
None for me.
Okay, great. Mr. Villalobos.
Commissioner Bradley,
Aye.
Commissioner Park. I'm sorry, Commissioner Park recused himself on this one. Commissioner Farini,
Aye.
Commissioner Martinez,
Aye.
and Chair Cooney.
Aye.
Motion passes 4-0.
All right, thank you, everyone. A lot of work done on this project. And that goes for the applicant and for the members of the public who are represented today. Mr. Wilson, do we have any other business before adjournment?
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, we don't have any further business today.
Okay. I hope you're getting better, Mr. Wilson.
I'm getting better. It's just the voice.
Okay. Well, by next week, we hope the voice is better as well. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh.